with a prayer. Prayers for peace sounded from the young people who have surfed the creative with us, spoken in their first languages, along with a visual feast that hopefully will bring our senses some pleasure and some sanity. So let's just take a moment together and arrive and enjoy this time of prayer. Of our heart, I want to take this moment to really remember those who danced with us on our dance floors, who are now with us in the spirit world specifically. We give great thanks and feel your presence, Dee Moulton, Kyle Donovan, Tamara Slayton, Adina Proussel, Dan Thomas, Mark Steenack, Stephen Moore, Katie, Shannon, Rachel Kessler, Bill Sell, Jane Prouty, Douglas Brady, David Blair, Mark Steenack, Mark Resnick, Gabrielle Roth, Cyril Shohin, and so many parents and siblings, Wick and Elise and Jeanette, and all the friends of the young ones who have passed during this 30 years of all of us being in this dance together. We are truly blessed and held from that world. Can you imagine? We're also really blessed in this world. We have such amazing elders who've carried us and tended to us and witnessed us and blessed us. And Elder Paul Hill always says, you don't begin a ceremony without asking permission from your elders to speak. So today I was blessed to be given permission. My father just happened to mention that there are no new ideas in the universe. He's 92. And by a strange twist of fate, I was on Skype with Anna Halprin, who just was speaking about how in this work we are always innovating new ideas. So honestly, this book, and truthfully, it is old news. And we're blessed tonight to have one of our great elders, my first movement teacher, great mystic and mime artist Samuel Avital, who has been with us for 8 decades of life and then some. And he sends so many blessings to this work and to this community. And he really was the person who lit that fire in me and got me moving. And he has a message that he sent, and parts of it I'll read. He said, I always knew these times were coming. And these are the times of great events in the world that, according to my ancient Jewish tradition teachings, would be coming. And I hope from the depths of my heart to encourage all beings, do not be afraid. Use the spiritual power that you have been prepared with to overcome this darkness with one's light and one's courage. So here we are. Thank you. Youth on Fire, birthing a generation of embodied global leaders. I really, really do appreciate you all coming out to celebrate this book as it finds their way out into the world. And it's so important that we keep gathering as a community to generate warmth in what we know is a pretty chilling time. And together, whether it's tonight or on the dance floors or in all of our interactions, my prayer is that we keep cultivating and tending this bonfire of goodness, of truth, of kindness, and of beauty. So, what is Youth on Fire? It's a weaving together of many stories. It's the story of my teachers and lineages that have come before us, many different lineages wove together to form the fabric of a body of work. It contains pieces of my story and the story of a body of work that many of us in this room have really cultivated together. And also, it's the story of hundreds of young people from around the world who've come of age through this work, and the thousands of others who've been touched and who have really brought their intelligence to help us build this bonfire. So tonight, I'm just going to share fractals of these stories. But I'd first like to really welcome our elders. And I would just love if you all would stand. Just let us see you. Those who've been in the work forever, long before any of us were born, some of you, Jackie, Rahima, Christopher, please stand. Chris, Mark, Brian, I can't see you all. Karen, Robbie, Tamara, please stand. Let's just all be We're really blessed to have had these people with us on this journey, because this work doesn't happen without the generations. And of course, all the young people, those of you, no matter how old you are now, but if you came of age in some way in this community, would you stand? We just really want to see those of you who are here tonight. Okay. Represent. Thank you. And then there's all those who've been at my side tending and mentoring and initiating and doing their own work right here with us. So let's have you all stand too, because those in the middle are really important. They're doing the day-to-day, year in and year out. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Tara and Leah and Jenny and others. Thank you. Martha. Thank you, Lisa. Isabel. Okay, so where did all this begin? Well, we know it began long before any of us were born. It began in a collective dream that we are all waking up to remember and co-create here and now. And yes, right now we are in the midst of a nightmare, a very serious one. But beneath the soils of this sickness, there is humanity's brilliance. Those of us who have been surfing the creative are catalyzing one small ripple in this collective wave of uprising. And I can say where this book began in my lifetime. It began in my pain body and the pure, loving innocence of a young girl who was always walking between the worlds of too much of everything, intensity, food, opportunities, neglect. And despite the seeming abundance, she had a deep soul starvation. I say in the book, I was an enraged, drug-dealing, obese teen. I was hungry, moving fast, and spitting out truths that sliced hearts. I was an American adolescent, outraged by the lack of attunement between what the adults around me were saying and doing and what I sensed the world needed. I knew I was not the only one famished on the planet. People were starving, and I wanted to help. By the time I was 15, my days were occupied with stuffing in any way I could. I sucked on daily packs of Camel non-filter cigarettes, binged on bagels, and toked on bongs and pipes of all kinds. I did whatever I could do to repress the intense confusion and terror, the grief fighting to get my attention. No one asked what was bothering me when I gained 30 pounds the summer after my sophomore year in high school. I acted as if I didn't care. By the time I was 17 years old, and I'm skipping lots of stuff that you can read, I was in a complete fog. I was lost to myself and unable to reach out for help, seeking comfort, seduction, and sedation through whatever might fill me. Nothing brought relief, so I kept using and abusing. Like many American kids, I left home after high school. Without clear guidance or protection, my life was a series of adventures and teachings that traveled the fine line of danger and destiny. I covered the high of wild concerts in the backwoods of Maine and long solo journeys hitchhiking around the country. I endured the lows of multiple rapes. Disoriented, I had no internal compass. Demanding internal voices were my guides, constantly stalking me, urging me to be more beautiful, more educated, more helpful to those suffering on the planet. It was hard for me to justify my pain. I had access to food, a home, and the opportunity for education. I was torn between my own needs and the needs of the world. The truth was, I was busy helping no one. I needed help that could assist. I turned to the lonely man picking me up on Highway 1 on the California coast, who so kindly, it seemed, took me home for dinner. To my mortification, I was the main dish. I fell in with the Moonies, who invited me to join them in Washington, D.C., spending days with them in their vans contemplating life. I turned to gentle flowers growing on the roadside for healing, to the mystical messages of Jerry Garcia, to fasting for weeks on end, to anything that would transport me out of my pain into some form of relief, however temporary. My story, as we know, is not unique. We hear so many stories of youth floating around, often derailing their lives and aborting their futures. Way too many young people are riding the waves from overwhelm to inertia, checking out rather than checking in, putting people and things and activities in place of themselves. Childhoods are lost, and thus adulthood is not reached. So, by the grace of destiny and something else that I don't understand, there was a rudder of intelligence that was moving me. I was able to find myself in situations that helped me begin to reorient. And I share many of those stories in this book. But what we've come to see is that the narrative that we're giving young people, the doorways we're giving young people to come home to themselves, to navigate through this naturally tricky and delicate and profoundly brilliant time of adolescence, the doorways we're giving are not adequate. And so young people, as we know, are going wherever they can to self-initiate or they get stuck, and they get stuck in that narrow passageways of adolescence. So this book begins to share some of the means that we have discovered both through my own healing and then through my years of working with young people, and now our community's collective effort, the means, the ways, the practices that help young people actually come home to themselves, come into community, and have healthy, life-giving initiations so that they can go through the process of repair and healing that so many young people need today. And they can actually learn the social skills, the emotional skills, the life skills that they need in order to begin to wake up into being whole people. And they need initiatory experiences that allow them to open to something bigger than themselves, because that's a natural developmental need of our young people, as we know. And then, of course, there's the mentoring. There are great rites of passage programs out there, but they're programs. They're not life processes. And one of the hallmarks of our work is that we hang in and hang on, and eventually we're learning to really let go and see all of our young people fly. So, yeah, that's a little bit of where it comes from in me, and there's a beautiful long story of my own healing and repair, and it continues on. This is a life path, and you all are helping me grow, and we're growing together. So the book has its story too. Quite a story, actually. But I want to just read one other little piece, because many of you have heard me say this. It's one thing to turn one's life into gold. It's quite another to study the maps for doing that. And it's quite another to be able to digest them so fully that you aren't following a recipe, but you learn how to use the ingredients so much that you can create your own programs, your own rites of passage, your own work for the world. So what I want to say before I tell the story of this book is just that. It's some ideas. And the maps described within are not the terrain. Writing, reading, and talking about rites of passage in general and our processes specifically is not the same as the experience. Talking about rites of passage in these young people only approximates a very powerful experience that by nature cannot be truly captured in theories or even accurately described. When the process unfolds within the sacred container, something alchemical occurs. Never in my wildest dreams could I orchestrate some of the maddening and mystical and magical things that have occurred when we all have gathered. I'll share one maddening. One summer, we were tight on time. Some of you will remember this. Or so we thought. So we decided to skip the death ceremony. Ha ha, said the spiritual world. You cannot play the boss in this kind of work. Within 24 hours of making the choice to omit that ceremony, our entire group of 70 was in the basement of our main lodge in lockdown. 2 men had escaped a crime scene and were roaming around the area wielding guns. The entire mountain region was in lockdown. Once these characters were arrested, we returned to our regular processes. Within a half a day, a young woman in our group went missing, lost in the woods. After search and rescue came, hovering over our site with helicopters and a strong search team on the ground, we got it. Do the death ritual or the death portal will do you. Tea. Okay, the book. So, with that said, it is really a living thing, this book, and it's had many iterations. The actual writing of it began when I was working on my doctoral dissertation in education, leadership, and change at the Fielding University. At that time, I began a very rigorous process of researching and documenting what was actually happening with the young people before, during, and after our rites of passage process. I began sorting through how this process fit in with the literature about youth development, somatics, rites of passage, and diversity and inclusion. Hundreds of hours of one-on-one interviews with young people, coupled with weekly focus groups, we began to see some patterns emerge. The young people were discovering their spirituality. They were healing their lives, mobilizing into action, learning to be with themselves, finding profound inner guidance and ever more healthy will to live their lives in accordance with their truths. They were unearthing mad amounts of inspiration and creativity, feeling empowered through community connections, making new and more positive choices about substance use and sexual expression. They were becoming more self-referential. And I just want to say, this is a public service announcement for all of us going out from here. There really is an ethic and a protocol for how we gather data when working with youth and how we share it with the world. And I'm so happy to work with people who want to tell the amazing stories of your work. But it's so important that the young people feel like they have choice and agency as we do share their stories. And I go into great length in the book about how we worked with the young people and really received their discernment and their blessings as their stories were shared. So I completed my doctoral work ready to write this book, right? 12 years later, this book has finally emerged out of me. It took me that long to resuscitate my poetic voice and marry that with my academic voice. In addition, 12 more years of data was gathered through the copious notes taken by myself and through every youth camp by Catherine Douglas. Woo, woo. During this time, I really fell in love with the word, with writing, and the solitude and the speaking that comes with it. There are so many people who've been involved in the writing of this book, and I can't see everybody out there, but I really want to thank Ramon and Sarita and Gabrielle who wrote the foreword to this book. They each share their stories of how their rituals of transformation and coming of age in part happened through Surfing the Creative and our collective work here. there's some editors that really just walked with me through so much, and I don't think any of them are here except Sarita. Am I correct? Yeah, so I just really want to thank you for the way that you saw me and loved me and believed in me, because I didn't have a lot of mirroring in my own creative process, other than from the young people, actually. And so you just walked with me and just coached me, and you were really discerning, and thank you. It's huge. And then so many people helped create the pictures and the images, Dana and Benjamin and Johanna. And I'm sure there are so many others I'm not remembering. But I just want to really thank you, because this work is community work. And yes, ask my beloved husband. I was definitely working around the clock for a long time. And that, he's like written 3 books while this thing came about. For real. So I did do the laboring here for a long time and over many, many decades, but it also has been many hands on deck, and I'm so grateful. Okay. I'll share one more story about this book. Just to, it's a firstborn. It's like high drama, truly. High maintenance. So some of you heard that the book was going to be released a month or 2 ago, right? And then we sent out these messages to know, by no cause of our own, the book is not coming out. In the last 2 months, this close-in team of editors and my layout person all were going through their own rites of passage. The book's Google Docs crashed. The eyesight was fully lost by one of my editors for a month. A parent died. A sister passed away, and a child ended up in ICU. This is since mid-December. So my job has really been, as it has been with this whole body of work, is to let go and flow with it all, and really also to stay on focus. And in the book, I talk about this concept called flocus. And so I look forward to you learning more about that, because certainly the writing of the book, the writer, and the subject written about were all initiatory processes. Okay, the book and what's inside. Youth on Fire shares a new narrative, a living, breathing, collective antidote to some of the problems of these times. And we know that, it is potentially going to escalate exponentially. And with that, we're going to all keep taking this energy that we have mobilized and bringing it out to the world. But as Elder Paul Hill said to me when number 45 was elected, and I said, what to do now? He said, keep on keeping on. He said, this work and work like it is the antihistamine for the social and environmental toxins of these times. So I'd like to talk a little bit about this new narrative that's needed. We good? Ready for some more of the reading? Okay, cool. Does anybody need a seat? I'm seeing some elders back there without chairs. I would love for anybody who needs a chair to come get one. You all good back there? There's seats. Right next to Megan. And people, we all know how to stand up for our elders. That's for sure. Okay. A new narrative. Our global community is currently asking some of the hard questions that traditional communities, youth development initiatives, and rites of passage practitioners have been asking for a long while. As our evening news takes notes of the thousands of youth around the globe who are choosing to leave their homelands to join radical and violent extremist groups, mainstream leaders are collectively considering what might be a counter-narrative to attract these young people. we are learning that these young people are not necessarily all coming from broken homes or impoverished communities with no hope of an education or jobs. Some come from privileged backgrounds and relative wealth. Many of them have grown up without strong religious grounding in their homes. What is becoming clear is that there are some basic, universal, unmet, adolescent developmental needs that these radical extremist groups promise to meet. In a study conducted by a Colonel, John Venhouse of the U.S. Army, we see an interesting pattern. He discovered that most of the young people joining radical groups are looking for four basic things. They're the revenge seekers, looking for an outlet for their frustrations. The status seekers, looking for recognition. The identity seekers, looking for a group to join. And the thrill seekers, looking for adventures. With this in mind, we can see that these extremist groups are powerfully strategic in their reach towards these lost youth, and especially those looking online for some kind of meaning or connection. In fact, the research notes that more than half of the battle that is taking place is in the battlefield of the media. These violent extremist movements with brands, identities, and ideologies reach through technology to link up with the youth, such as the underwear bomber. This young man had posted this message online: I do not have a friend. I have no one to speak to, no one to consult, no one to support me, and I feel depressed and lonely. I do not know what to do. Have you met that young person? I sure have. Perhaps he's your dope-smoking teenager sulking in his room, or she is the self-loathing girl scanning Facebook for some reflections of herself. Z could be the frustrated young one roaming the city streets looking for something, anything to engage and match their creative energies. Without a community to engage our youth, way too many are feeling disconnected. And our work is one of the new narratives that are here, that are alive, that are available to young people. We're a dance-based rites of passage guided by loving mentors and inspired role models. And together we are making a difference, one nervous system at a time, one young person at a time, one community at a time, because so many of these young people are actually going back to their communities and seeding this work in their home places. And as I'll share towards the end of our time together, there's also not just the individuals, but the collective and the repair that's happening for those of us who come together as a diverse community. So the book, What's Inside, I've shared a whole bunch of it. But of course, the book takes us on the journey through the 7 cycles of this rites of passage process. And many of you have been on it, so I'm not going to tell the story. But I'm going to pick out a few things that maybe you haven't heard or just fun to hear again. Or for those of you who are here for the first time, we do hope you will surf with us. And if not, just come dance. And if not, just keep moving. So the first cycle of our work is, or the second cycle, actually the first is soul call, hearing that call to action, to show up, to come out of inertia into oneself. And the second is called ground of being. And this is really that process of learning how to come into center in our bodies, this landscape where all the dysregulation and all the disconnection happens, and where the repair can also unfold, and the will can engage, and the spirit can infuse us to move forward. So I haven't read this to this group. I think I'll share the story of when I met Gabrielle. My mentor, one of my many mentors. At the age of 26, I was heading to a 12-step meeting in my hometown of Pittsburgh. I saw a flyer on the co-op wall that riveted me into attention. It had a photo of this dark-haired lady wired to her headset, sitting on concrete city steps, a funky, mysterious woman who was offering a dance workshop in my very own neighborhood. I did not even see her name. I just knew I had to be there. Although my babysitter did not show up the next morning when the workshop started, I managed to get in the room with my soon-to-be one of my greatest mentors, Gabrielle Roth. One of my friends drove by as I was playing outside with my daughter, already having to let go of being able to attend this event. He looked at me and said, "No way, I'll take Mariah for the day." He must have sensed something significant was in the air, and indeed it was. That first day of dancing, I was so out of my body and thrilled to be moving energy that I blew out my ankle. Of course, I could not then disappear in the group. Nervously, I shuffled up to Gabrielle. She smiled warmly and told me to dance off my feet and begin to use my whole body on the floor. She also encouraged me to join her group going out for lunch. As we drove through the Pittsburgh city streets a few hours later, I sat right behind Gabrielle in the car. She was talking about her first teacher training that she was beginning later that year. I asked her, "How do you know if you're ready for something like that?" In Gabrielle's way, she turned around and simply said, "Oh, often those who don't think they're ready are the ones most ready. Why don't you apply?" What could I say to that? I applied. Unlike almost everyone else in the training, I had no previous experience in Gabrielle's work except the 2-day workshop. Regardless, I simply had to step into the truth and own it that I too could dance. In fact, it became clear that in order to live, I had to dance. After finding that dance, I began to find myself dancing all the time, dancing through my grief of another relationship washed out to sea. That's done. Dancing through my outrage at how public education devalued diverse youth's ways of thinking. Let's be sure to veto this person that they're talking about getting into education. What's her name? I don't even know. DeVos or something. Seriously, we have like tonight to work on that. Call your senators. I'm serious. Dancing through my excitement about ideas that came pouring into me as I opened to the portal of vast creative energies, dancing to clear the past, dancing to explore the present, and dancing to vision the future. So dance became my path, and in this work of initiation, we help all the young people, many of whom come as dancers, but many of whom don't even realize they have a body, help them find dance and other somatic arts as a way of coming home to the sacred soils of their own beings. And we move that and we work with the young people and introduce them to their hearts through somatic processes, through many different streams, compassionate communication, this whole body of work that we call embodied empathy, and of course through working with the emotions in dance and in movement. I'm going to keep moving. What's our time frame? Oh, yeah, I'm totally going to keep moving. You'll have to get the book and read it, because there's some cool stories in here. All right. I'm going to pause for a minute, just catch my breath. I'll read you one thing from this, just to give you a little taste of what pisses off the young people. We explore what scares them, what excites them, what breaks their heart, what they're longing for, what they love. Neglect pisses me off. Over-medicating kids pisses me off. Poverty pisses me off. These are their words. Environmental toxins piss me off. My father's smoking pisses me off. Smoking so much myself pisses me off. Girls being stolen from their school and then being sold to older men pisses me off. Corporate greed pisses me off. My sister not sharing her clothes with me pisses me off. Racism in America pisses me off. And of course the list grows. But we give the young people and the adults and all of us permission to really feel this, to express it, so that we can not just be in reaction to our lives, but start to be in creation, which leads to the next cycle of our work together, the liberating of the creative life force. And we take the young people through a pretty deep process of turning towards their families of origin. And some of these kids have actually witnessed their parents being murdered by their neighbors in a genocide in the Congo or Rwanda. Others of these kids have been adopted. Others of these kids have 4 sets of parents and, complex family systems. And others of these young people have 2 healthy parents that are right there in the room to welcome them as they come home, and so many other stories. And we learn to navigate that together as a community and recognize the intelligence we can share from our different stories. We come through this process of where do I come from, what's my biography, and how does that help shape my destiny? And from there, we do a lot of exploration of creativity. You can see some of the work up there. You saw some of it up there. And you've seen it in the incredible work that's now happening out in the world through so many of our young people. We go from there into a conversation around who am I as a fertile being? Not just a creative being, but a fertile being. And a person who's longing for healthy intimacy. Who am I as a sexual being? And we spend not enough time there, but we touch it and we try to create opportunities for young people to really contemplate these subjects in ways that are beautiful, that are scientifically sound, but are also really allowing them to remember and feel the sacredness of this incredible part of our lives. And I'm very blessed to have been partnered with my dear friend Tara King in the birthing of this part of the work. And many young people around the world have had the opportunity to reframe their relationships with their emerging sexuality. And I'll read just this piece of the work, just a little bit about it, just to give you a flavor. Are you up for a little more? Yes. Okay, good. Okay, we work with youth of diverse religious beliefs and of all sexual orientations. Youth who have been sexually active since 11 or 12 years old, along with youth who wait until their late 20s to enter the realm of sexual exploration. Young people who will marry their first sexual partners, young people who have experienced rape and incest, youth who have habitually sleep with people they do not know, youth who work with teens themselves around sexual identity or safety or other matters of sexual health, young people transitioning from one gender to another, youth who identify as gay, bi, trans, queer, or lesbian, youth who have taken vows of celibacy, teen parents, girls who do not yet have their menstrual cycles, youth with multiple addictions, girls who have never shown their body to another except their moms in early childhood, and monogamous young people with enduring experiences and respectful and satisfying intimacy. And regardless of their stories, we see gentle awakenings and radical healings happen for our young people during the cycle of their rite of passage, because we're teaching them that it's okay to be in these bodies. It's okay to know, to have boundaries. It's okay to know what your feelings and to learn ways of communicating with the other about that. And it's okay to love your creativity and to have that in your belly before you go out and start to interface and co-create with other. And throughout the book, I share antidotes of these cycles. And here's one from this cycle, Chad. And in this case, we have changed the names, although most people ask me not to change their names. But for this piece, we did. Chad, a young man who grew up in the midst of a genocide and rampant rapings, found himself sleeping with strangers many times a week during his late teens. After engaging in our work for years, he learned to intimately connect with people he actually knows and truly loves. Frustrated Renata was a gifted actress, able to express herself freely on a stage, yet unable to reach orgasm in the privacy of her lovemaking. Through her journey of dancing into safe community, she was able to open more fully into her orgasmic, ecstatic nature. And there was Soul, a young man who was sexually abused by a person in power in his church, arrived in our work enraged. After spending some time untangling the layers of confusion and subsequent shame and acting out from his pubescent violations, he is actually now joyously married and expecting his first child. These are just a few examples of how this body of work has helped our youth rewire and eventually hook up in the highest sense of the word. So listen, you all, I'm not going to pretend that this is all just a happy, glowy success sex story. We have had so many challenges in this work. And our commitment is to stay with them and to stay with them long enough so that whatever is unresolved can transform and move into true optimal connection. We've had kids that have gone to prison. We've seen murder. We've seen, those are obviously two of the really hard ones. We've seen young kids go into all kinds of things and come back. But mostly, as one of my doctoral mentors said, what did he say? It was something like, this story is too good to be true. It really is quite remarkable what happens when community comes together in these ways. And it's such an honor to be a part of this story and to help share the story. And that's what this book is really all about. So after we feel like we're moving out of our adolescence and starting to experience ourselves as young adults, exploring our intimacy, our sexuality, and all that good stuff, we actually, in our rites of passage process, begin to help move the young people out into the world. And in our journey over the years, and this has been enacted as year-long programs, as 1-week summer camps, as 5-week summer camps, we enact a number of ceremonies that include service learning, that include spending time with our elders, that include time in nature, really listening to the voices outside of our own head and outside of our own room. And we listen to one another very deeply. Where have you been? What is your story? How can I hold that? Actually, it was a revelation this summer that the kids in the Middle East were hearing stories of what was going on in South Africa and realized that they were not the only place where there was violation and strife and healing and repair. And in this book, I begin to name some of these processes. And one of my favorites is something called STOP, which is the somatic transforming oppression process. And what's my favorite about it is that we're still on the front lines of learning about it, but it's described in here. Because after, what happens is young people begin to feel the world coming in, and they're so ready to get out of the dance room and out back into their communities. And we have to deal with these issues of what's really going on at a systemic level, at an ideological level, at an interpersonal level that's separating us, that's making it possible for some kids to hear their vision, get their dream, and be able to have the support financially and even have access to the opportunities that they need in order to bring their dreams into reality. And there are other kids in that room, even kids that have grown up in Boulder, who don't have those kinds of opportunities. So we wrestle with that. And we've really, we've begun creating enough safety so that the mess of all the isms that we're all seeing all over the place can come out in our rooms, and we can begin to see how can we hear each other, how can we work together, how can we really capitalize on our collective intelligence. And a lot of that, like I've said, is described in these pages. I want to close with just sharing a few of the pictures of what's actually possible. Because eventually, you see these young people. You see them in the community as leaders now, standing by my side, but out there innovating and creating all kinds of programs around the world. And all the ripples of us coming together begin to form a lake. And the waves begin to coalesce. Waves begin to form. Together, hundreds of youth and adults alike have moved from the many, creating waves of peace, sustainability, beauty, and hope. And amidst all the destruction and chaos, creative waves of innovation are indeed coming in. In fact, I believe there is a new culture rising, ancient in its essence, contemporary in its emergence. This ever-growing global culture of diverse young people is dancing onto the world stage, honoring their own and one another's ancestral differences while remembering their inherent human unity, one nervous system at a time, one authentic gesture at a time, one culture inspiring another. These embodied global citizens are not just thinking about how they can work together. They are literally excavating and grounding their natural intelligence within their own bodies Through this conscious process of embodying the sacred soils of their souls, found in their cells and actualized through their service, they are recognizing that they are intricately connected to all living systems. Rooted in this vast landscape opening up from within, they are attracted and attuned to all of life. They are considering the ever-innovating frontiers of right relationship with the earth and one another. Dance is the doorway. Rhythm is the universal language. Grounded in love and action is the outcome. Visions are igniting. Practical steps are being taken from our dance studios onto the dance floors of ordinary life, fostering a new ordinary. And I believe that despite and maybe even because of all that we're seeing at this time. The new ordinary is dedicated to sustainability, justice, and peace. Across borders in the Middle East, in refugee settlements on the border of the Congo, in youth centers on Main Street, USA, in townships in South Africa, in villages in South India, on college campuses, eco-villages, church basements, orphanages, and yes, even the United Nations. This is a moving movement born through the first and final frontier of our bodies, nourished by the warmth of our hearts, sustained by the health of our collective will. The flame of this movement has been ignited. Youth are on fire, tended at this time by these mighty emerging leaders. This movement has grown into a life-giving bonfire, shining warmth and light into many places around the world. Let's work together. Let's keep going to birth a new generation of these leaders, those who are in service of life. All of us dancing fools whose visions are shining bright, whose creativity is liberated, whose hearts are beating to the songs of the wonder and the wailing, finely tuned instruments of humanity who harness spirit as it effortlessly moves through and as us. My friends, the whole world is calling. So early in the book, I start with the children of the world are calling. And the whole book weaves the journey from that stirring in my soul to that final knowing that we are called. And we're very blessed to be able to respond to that call together. We're going to close this evening with a short video that Blythe Massey and I just together over the last week that shares the story of how when we bring these young people together to enact their individual rites of passage, it has now transformed into a collective rites of passage that I feel has critical seeds for building communities of peace. So I'll let it speak for itself. You'll recognize many of these dear friends. This night to the children who have lost their homes to genocide, to war, and are living their lives in refugee settlements.
African American youth now afraid to walk in their cities' streets due to the police brutality.
The 2 million plus girls who were sexually awakened early through sex slavery and marriage.
To these mighty warriors who've had the bravery, the devotion to turn their lives of suffering. Thank you all. Thank you so much for coming and bearing witness and celebrating with us. Okay, so I know many have children at home and things to be done. We're going to make the book available for purchase if you want. There's a CD that actually is the music. It's as thick and dense and rich and potent and works completely aligned with that. Megan Chandler has everything to do with that. That goes with the CD. So please feel free to purchase that. But before we head out, I just want to take a moment and is there anything anybody wants to ask or say? There's so much more to be said, and I hope we get to dance and create and connect and dialogue for like decades. You know, I really, that's my deepest prayer. And but is there anything tonight that's burning that wants to be requested or offered? Yes, Keegan.
First, I wanted to say I'm sorry to you because earlier you asked me a question, or you said a statement. Wow, you came all the way from Denver. And I wasn't truthful in my response with the gravity of why I came here. I borrowed a friend's car to get here because it's emotional. For the work that I've done on myself from being a part of this with you, from being numbed in my heart from the Marine Corps to now watching my heart daily with attention and awareness, it helps me to affect the people in my life with the joy and happiness that I really feel genuinely instead of as an act. And I thank you. If you can understand any of that.
Oh, we got it. We got it. Noble hearts. Yeah. Anything else?
Melissa, I want to offer one thing. I've photographed you and been with you for a long time, and you have the glow of a new mother. You birthed this book so beautifully.
I am really happy to have this. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just really want to thank you all that have, those of you, and I think of you, my friend Fernando, and you know, you've pushed it so hard. You've grown us so thoroughly. And we have these crazy karmic dates with each other, and they're not comfortable. And when we hang in there, when we stay in the hard conversations, which many of us have done, incredible things can happen. And so that's my deepest prayer amongst us. We don't know what's going to happen out there, but there's a lot of us in here. And so let's stay engaged. When it gets tricky, when it gets hard, let's keep coming back and leaning into each other and use amazing tools that we have. Like, don't even try and talk about it if you haven't danced first or emptied the jug. I'm serious, okay? Because I do feel, and it's been said, that the new threshold is that space between us. So let's keep tending that, okay? Because that's what we know we got, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Of course.
I feel like deep gratitude for you because you helped me transform my life, helped me stay in Boulder and go to graduate school. If it wasn't for this work, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be able to stand here right now. Just to stand is hard. So you've expanded my heart. You helped me find my dance. You helped me find my voice, Melissa. Yeah, I don't want to cry, so I'm just gonna sit down. But this work is not bullshit. So.
I just want to thank you for your courage to excavate your own soul story with so much dedication that it is alchemy. And the alchemy is that the medicine that you show up with on the dance floor in the rites of passage programs, of making that possible for an international rites of passage program, which is unheard of to have international rites of passage coming together through the embodied doorway. And as all of us here, we have had the experience of that doorway. And your devotion and your commitment to showing up week after week and night after night and day after day and month after month and year after year, Melissa, is such, like, you are a force like no other. Really, you are a force like no other. May you, I guess I just want to say, like, you have raised the children. You have raised the children who will raise the children. It's happening. And I like just offer a prayer that you get to rest more and swim in the ocean more and like be in those waves of the peace in the midst of this time of chaos, because there are so many revolutionary leaders here here and throughout the world that have been so deeply touched by your work. Thank you.
It's really true that, and I speak to it in the book. I didn't read that whole thing, that I had this mandate to raise the children so that we could raise the children together. And it's true. You all are here. But I want to say, now that I have come through menopause, I am not looking to go swim and hang out in the beach. Although I love the ocean and I'll definitely go there every now and then, I actually want to see this work actually become even more part of culture, part of community, part of global thinking, and certainly part of the new agenda for education in our nation. Yeah.
Yes, one more advice. I'm filled with love for you and your work. And you aren't going to be able to rest in the ocean too much, because I feel you are going to be called to help refugees. It's like a new growth in your work or something. Someone I work with hasn't had direct contact with your work, has any direct contact, and is filled with support and love, because through letters she can see the impact that you're having around the world. It's beautiful and needed, so you can rest a little bit. There's more work.
Jackie, I think you're talking about a Republican senator's, somebody in one of the offices that helps get our young people here, who's like, okay, so if they can't get across this summer, we've got plenty right here. And it's true. I'm definitely already down in Denver working with the refugee community and care a lot about continuing that. And you have done so much to make all of this work, Jackie. Whoa. Okay, any questions? Any last words? We love you, Melissa. We
love you.
Okay, so youth on fire. God danced the day you were born. Thank you all. Let's keep finding each other and caring for each other.